In what became the most remarkable transformation in Riverpoint City's history, a simple act of drunken harassment at Willow Creek Park ignited an extraordinary chain of events that would reshape an entire troubled neighborhood's understanding of redemption when a group of intoxicated motorcycle riders made their gravest mistake by targeting a seemingly vulnerable man who carried the weight of 3 championship belts in his past. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, tell us where you're watching from, and if stories of unexpected heroes inspire you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow we've got something special that will leave you speechless. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Willow Creek Park as Michael Chen methodically moved through his daily Tai Chi routine, his large frame moving with unexpected grace despite his size. To casual observers, he might have appeared just another middle-aged man trying to stay active, his oversized hoodie hiding both his bulk and the disciplined muscle underneath. But 15 years ago, before retiring from professional fighting, he had been known as the Mountain Chen, a 3-time heavyweight MMA champion whose ground game had revolutionized heavyweight fighting. The gentle splashing of the park's fountain provided a peaceful backdrop as children played nearby, their laughter mixing with the rustle of autumn leaves. This quiet corner of Riverpoint City had become Michael's sanctuary after retiring from the cage, a place where he could find the inner peace that had eluded him during his fighting years. "Evening, Mr. Chen," Sarah Rodriguez's cheerful voice carried across the park as the elderly community center director approached, carrying her signature basket of homemade empanadas. Her bright yellow cardigan stood out against the deepening shadows of dusk. "You're spoiling me again, Sarah." Michael straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. Maria would have loved these. His voice softened at the mention of his late wife, who had helped him find purpose after leaving the fight game. "Someone has to look after you," Sarah set her basket on a nearby bench. "Besides, you're the only one who helps me keep the youth program running. This year's boxing class is finally making a difference with the at-risk kids." The distant roar of motorcycles echoed through the park, causing Sarah's smile to fade. "They're back. 4th time this week." Michael remained calm, methodically stretching his shoulders, an old habit from his fighting days that had saved him from countless submission attempts during his career. The Thunder Kings had been getting bolder. Officer Martinez had reported 3 muggings in the neighboring district when their victims refused to hand over their wallets. The Kim family's convenience store had been vandalized just last week when their teenage son stood up to the gang's demands for free beer. "You should head home, Sarah," Michael said quietly, his experienced eyes already scanning the park's layout, marking distances and escape routes, skills ingrained from countless fights in the octagon. "I'll handle this." "Michael Chen, don't you dare let those thugs intimidate you," Sarah warned, but hurried toward her car, her basket clutched tightly. She'd barely pulled away when 6 motorcycles roared into the park, their engines deliberately revving near the playground equipment, sending children and parents scattering in fear. Their leader, a towering figure known as Skull, cut an imposing silhouette against the darkening sky. His leather vest bore the Thunder King's signature emblem, a crowned skull wreathed in lightning. "Well, look what we got here, boys," Skull called out, killing his engine. Some fat guy doing his little dance routine. His followers spread out, their heavy boots crushing flowers in the community garden as they moved. To them, Michael appeared to be just another vulnerable local about to learn a harsh lesson about the Thunder King's new authority in Riverpoint City. They couldn't have known they were about to spark a transformation that would change everything. Michael stood motionless near the playground, his hands relaxed at his sides. To the untrained observer, the large man in his oversized hoodie might have seemed afraid, but there was something in his stillness, a focused calm that came from countless hours spent in the octagon, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Nice moves there, fat boy," Skull continued, pulling on fingerless leather gloves studded with steel. "But this park has a new membership fee. $100 keeps you safe from accidents." He kicked over a planter box filled with children's sunflower projects. "Otherwise, bad things happen." "Those were the kids' flowers," Michael said softly. His voice carried no obvious threat, but something in his tone made 2 of the younger bikers exchange uncertain glances. Like novice fighters sensing a veteran's presence in the ring, They could feel something was off, but couldn't explain why. Behind them, Sarah's granddaughter Emily watched from behind a tree, her phone quietly recording. The 12-year-old should have left with her grandmother, but her instinct to document injustice, honed through her dream of becoming a journalist, kept her hidden and watching. "Oh, the little brat's garden project?" Skull grinned maliciously. "Maybe we should pay their community center a visit too. Bet they've got some nice computers we could protect." His followers laughed, but it was hollow laughter that masked growing uncertainty. Something about the big man's stance and unwavering gaze had begun to unsettle them. The evening shadows lengthened across the park as two forces prepared to collide, one ruled by intimidation and chemical courage, the other guided by years of disciplined training and precision. Neither side could have predicted how this confrontation would reshape not just their lives, but the very soul of Riverpoint City itself. In the distance, the community center's clock chimed 6 p.m., marking the moment when everything was about to change. Skull took a menacing step forward, brass knuckles glinting in the fading light. "Boys, show Tubby here what happens when people don't respect the Thunder Kings." The bikers moved to encircle Michael, their boots trampling more of the children's flower garden. A massive man called Bruiser made the first move, swinging a heavy chain at Michael's head. But 15 years of professional fighting had taught Michael to read body language with uncanny precision. He wasn't there when the chain came down. With movements that seemed impossible for a man his size, Michael had already shifted to what fighters called the pocket, that perfect distance for striking. Just as he'd done hundreds of times in championship bouts, he moved with an economy of motion that spoke of thousands of hours of training. The autumn breeze carried the scent of crushed flowers and spilled beer as the confrontation reached its tipping point. Emily's phone captured everything, her young hands steady as she documented what was about to become a pivotal moment in Riverpoint City's history. Behind the Thunder Kings, a group of Michael's youth program students had gathered at a safe distance, their eyes wide. These were the kids everyone else had given up on, the ones who'd found hope in his after-school boxing classes. Now they were about to see their gentle instructor in a very different light. "Last chance to leave peacefully," Michael said, his voice still carrying that strange calm. "After that, things get complicated." The setting sun cast long shadows across the park, turning the peaceful community space into an arena where the future of the neighborhood hung in the balance. The bikers erupted in laughter, but it was the hollow kind that masked growing uncertainty. Something about the large man's stance and unwavering gaze had begun to unsettle them. The evening breeze continued to whisper through Willow Creek Park as two forces prepared to collide, one ruled by intoxicated bravado, the other guided by years of championship discipline. "You're dead meat, fat boy," Skull snarled, brass knuckles gleaming. "Boys, teach this whale what happens when people don't respect the Thunder Kings." The bikers moved to surround Michael, their boots crushing more of the children's flower beds with deliberate malice. A giant called Bruiser made the first move, swinging his heavy chain in a deadly arc at Michael's head. But 15 years of professional fighting had taught Michael to read body language like a book. He wasn't there when the chain came down. With movements that seemed impossible for his size, Michael had already executed a perfect slip, the same move that had won him his first title fight. Before Bruiser could recover, Michael's counter was already in motion. A precise palm strike to the sternum learned during his early days training in Indonesia sent Bruiser sprawling into the dirt, gasping for air. The remaining bikers froze momentarily, their alcohol-addled minds struggling to process what they'd just witnessed. "What the hell?" Two bikers, Snake and Ghost, charged forward together. Michael moved like flowing water between them, his footwork as graceful as his earlier Tai Chi routine. His movements were economical and precise. No wasted energy, no flashy techniques, just the same calculated efficiency he'd used in countless title defenses. Within seconds, both men were on the ground, their own aggressive charges used against them with textbook throws that any MMA fan would have recognized from Michael the Mountain Chen's legendary ground game. Skull's face contorted with rage. "Razor, Blade, kill him." The remaining bikers pulled knives, circling Michael cautiously. They attacked from opposite directions, expecting to overwhelm the bigger target. Instead, Michael used their coordinated assault against them. Years of defending against the world's best strikers had given him an instinctive understanding of timing and distance. "You're dead, fat man," Skull roared, charging in with his brass knuckles raised. But Michael had already noted his opponent's drunken swagger, calculated his reach, and identified the optimal angle of attack. He stepped inside Skull's wild swing, executing a perfect hip toss that had won him his second championship belt. "That's what the Russian champion said too," Michael replied quietly as Skull hit the ground hard. He was wrong. The fight ended swiftly after that. When Officer Martinez arrived 10 minutes later, responding to Sarah's worried call, she found 6 members of the notorious Thunder Kings secured with their own belts and chains, arranged in a neat row along the park's main pathway. "Christ, Chen," the officer sighed, surveying the scene. Couldn't leave the excitement behind in the octagon? Michael was already carefully replanting the children's trampled sunflowers. "They threatened Sarah's community center, Carmen. You know I couldn't let that stand." But this was just the beginning. No one could have predicted how this single confrontation would spiral into something far greater than a simple fight. The gentle giant who had found peace teaching troubled kids was about to embark on his most challenging match yet, one that would transform not just his life, but the lives of everyone in Riverpoint City. Emily's video of the incident was already uploading to social media, and by sunset, Riverpoint City would be buzzing with an incredible revelation. The quiet man who taught boxing to at-risk youth was none other than the Mountain Chen, the legendary 3-time heavyweight champion whose disappearance from the fight scene had sparked years of speculation. Word of the confrontation at Willow Creek Park spread through the city like wildfire. By nightfall, Officer Martinez's precinct was flooded with calls from reporters and fight fans, all trying to verify the incredible rumors. The viral video, shot by young Emily, had already reached 1 million views, with combat sports forums exploding with frame-by-frame analysis of the legendary Mountain Chen's return. In the city jail, Skull nursed his bruised ego along with his injuries. His lieutenant Marcus Viper Torres listened through the cell phone as Skull spat orders. "Get everyone together by morning. I want that park turned into a war zone. Nobody makes the Thunder Kings look weak." "Boss, maybe we should think this through," Viper suggested, watching other Thunder Kings gather at their bar hideout. Something wasn't adding up about this situation. The way he moved, the way he controlled the fight. I used to follow MMA. That takedown looked familiar. "Are you questioning me?" Skull's voice turned dangerous. "That fat man humiliated the Thunder Kings. Nobody does that and lives to tell about it." The pieces were in motion. A simple act of defense had sparked a chain of events that would reshape an entire community. But first, blood would be spilled, trust would be broken, and unlikely alliances would form in the most unexpected places. Meanwhile, at the community center, Officer Martinez photographed Emily's bruised phone screen, carefully documenting the incident while Michael methodically cleaned the youth boxing equipment. Each heavy bag was carefully wiped down with the same patience he'd once used to perfect his ground game. "Mr. Chen, you need protection," Carmen insisted. "When the rest of the Thunder Kings find out about this—" "I appreciate the concern, officer," Michael interrupted gently, his hands never stopping their work. "But I can handle myself." Carmen wasn't giving up. "Sir, there are at least 30 more gang members out there. They've never let an insult go unanswered. Just last month they hospitalized the Kim's teenage son for standing up to them." "Then maybe it's time someone stood up to them properly." Michael's voice remained calm, but Carmen noticed how his eyes constantly scanned the room, checking angles and distances. This was not the behavior of a simple community center instructor. The stage was set for an unprecedented confrontation that would test not just Michael's skills, but his belief in the possibility of redemption. The quiet streets of Riverpoint City were about to become a battleground once again, but this time the greatest victory would come not from defeating opponents, but from transforming them. Back at the station, Officer Martinez shared her observations with Captain Reynolds. "Sir, the video confirms it. That's Michael the Mountain Chen, 3-time heavyweight champion, undefeated record. He disappeared from the fight scene 5 years ago after his wife's death." Captain Reynolds sighed, looking at a folder marked confidential on his desk. Some things are better left alone, Carmen. Just know that Chen isn't the one we need to worry about right now. That evening, Sarah refused to close the community center despite Michael's protests. She sat at her desk stubbornly organizing program schedules. Those thugs threatened my kids' futures. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't skip dinner again. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, preparing the next day's youth program materials. A car pulled up outside. Dr. James Park, the sports medicine specialist who had been ring doctor for many of Michael's fights, hurried in. "Michael, I just saw the video. Are you okay?" His eyes quickly scanned his former fighter for injuries with professional assessment. "I'm fine, James. Just some light exercise." Michael managed a small smile, but his eyes never stopped monitoring the windows and doorways. Maintaining situational awareness had become second nature during his years in the octagon. "Light exercise? The whole city's talking about how you single-handedly took down half the Thunder Kings." He lowered his voice. "They're saying Skull is out for blood." "Let him come," Michael said quietly, but something in his tone made both Sarah and James exchange worried glances. They recognized the calm certainty of a man who had faced the world's most dangerous fighters and emerged victorious. At the neighborhood church, Pastor Williams was dealing with the aftermath in his own way. The Thunder Kings had been extorting protection money from his youth ministry for months. He called an emergency meeting with local business owners. "We can't let Michael face this alone," David Kim argued from his chair, still recovering from the beating his son had taken. "The Kings will come back with everything they've got." "But what can we do?" Frank Torres from the bodega asked. "They're killers. We're just shopkeepers and teachers." Pastor Williams looked thoughtful. "Maybe that's been our problem all along. We've been acting alone. It's time we stood together." As night fell, the Thunder Kings gathered in force at their bar headquarters. Over 30 bikes lined up outside as Skull, recently released on bail, laid out his plan for revenge. But Viper couldn't shake his unease. He'd competed in amateur MMA before joining the gang, and something about the way Chen had fought seemed hauntingly familiar. "Check this out," Snake said, showing Viper his phone. He'd been digging into Chen's background. Guy moved here 5 years ago after his wife died, started teaching boxing to troubled kids. But before that, holy shit. 3-time heavyweight champion, undefeated record. They used to call him the Mountain Chen. "Skull, we need to know more before we move against him," Viper warned, his fighter's instincts screaming danger. "The way he neutralized our guys, that was world-class technique. Those weren't street moves." "We know all we need to know," Skull snarled. "Tonight we show Riverpoint City what happens when you disrespect the Thunder Kings." Young Emily Rodriguez, Sarah's granddaughter, watched from her hiding spot behind a dumpster. She'd followed the bikers hoping to gather more footage for her growing social media coverage. Her heart raced as she heard their plans, but as she turned to slip away, her phone clattered to the ground. "What was that?" Bruiser's voice boomed. "Check the perimeter." Emily ran, her feet pounding on the pavement. Behind her, motorcycles roared to life. The girl knew these back streets well from her daily paper route, but the bikes were faster. Headlights illuminated her path as the gang closed in. Just when Emily thought she was done for, a familiar SUV appeared from a side street. The passenger door flew open. "Get in," Michael commanded. Emily dove into the vehicle as Michael executed a perfect defensive driving maneuver, throwing up a cloud of dust that blinded their pursuers. In the rearview mirror, Emily watched the frustrated bikers pull up short. "How did you know?" she gasped, her heart still racing. "Sarah called, said you were acting suspicious at dinner." Michael's voice was calm, but his eyes never stopped checking the mirrors, assessing potential pursuit angles just as he'd once analyzed opponents' movements in the cage. "That was brave, Emily. Stupid, but brave." "They're coming tonight," Emily blurted out. "All of them. They're going to destroy the community center." Michael nodded, unsurprised. "I know. That's why I need you to help me get everyone to safety." The SUV turned toward the church where lights were already on as word spread of the impending confrontation. Riverpoint City was about to experience a night that would change everything. The question wasn't whether the Thunder Kings would attack, but whether one former champion could protect an entire community from their vengeance. Unknown to everyone, this night would set in motion events that would either tear Riverpoint City apart or forge it into something stronger than anyone could imagine. The real battle wasn't just about protecting a community center. It was about saving the soul of a neighborhood. The old church basement hummed with nervous energy as Michael addressed the gathered community members. Officer Martinez stood by the door, her fellow officers strategically positioned around the building. Outside, the distant rumble of motorcycles grew steadily louder, like approaching thunder. "Everyone stays here until it's over," Michael instructed, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded respect in arenas worldwide. His eyes moved methodically across the room, assessing positions and angles just as he had done in countless title fights. "Officer Martinez and her team will keep you safe." "But it's our community center they're coming to destroy," David Kim protested, his bruised face still showing evidence of his son's beating. "Everything you've built for our kids. Buildings can be rebuilt," Michael replied, his gaze meeting Sarah's determined stare. "Lives can't. No arguments, Sarah, you too." "The hell with that," Sarah declared, standing straight despite her years. "Maria would never forgive me if I let you face this alone. Besides, those troubled kids need their sanctuary. Some of them have nowhere else to go." A ghost of a smile crossed Michael's face. Sarah's mention of his late wife Maria, who had inspired him to open the youth program, hit home. The same program that had given hope to dozens of kids others had written off. Officer Martinez pulled Michael aside. "You sure about this?" "I can have SWAT here in an hour." "An hour is too long," Michael replied, checking his watch with the same precision he once used to time his rounds. "This needs to end tonight, Carmen. These kids have lived in fear long enough." The officer nodded reluctantly. "You know, when you moved here, I thought you were done with fighting." "So did I." Michael looked up at the darkening sky, remembering countless nights spent training in empty gyms. "Sometimes we don't choose our fights. They choose us." At the community center, Michael worked quickly and methodically. To any observer, his preparations might have seemed strange. He wasn't boarding up windows or setting up barricades. Instead, he was strategically positioning training equipment, adjusting the lighting systems, and rearranging the heavy bags in seemingly random patterns. But to a trained fighter's eye, each placement had purpose. Each angle was calculated. He was creating a controlled environment, using the same principles that had made him a legendary champion, setting up choke points, controlling movement paths, establishing dominant positions. Though this time, his intention wasn't to destroy opponents, but to control the battlefield without permanent damage. Meanwhile, the Thunder Kings gathered at their staging area. Skull paced in front of his assembled force, 40 riders strong, the largest gathering of the gang in years. "This ends tonight," his voice carried over the rumbling engines. "Chen humiliated us, made us look weak. After we're done with his precious community center, no one will dare stand against the Thunder Kings again." But Viper noticed something odd. Their most violent members were cheering, but some of the fighters in the group looked uncomfortable. He recognized the look. He'd seen it in the mirror often enough during his amateur fighting days. It was the face of men who'd seen enough real combat to know when they were walking into something dangerous. "Snake Tank, you take the east entrance," Skull ordered, his scarred face twisted with anticipation. "Viper's team hits from the west. I want that place surrounded." "Boss," Viper spoke up, his fighter's instincts screaming warning signals. "Something's not right. Chen had hours to clear out, but my sources say he's still there, alone." "Good. Makes it easier," Skull grinned. "No," Viper insisted. "It makes it suspicious. No normal man stays to face 40 armed riders alone." His voice trailed off as more tactical anomalies became clear. "The way he positioned us during the first fight, the way he isolated our strongest members first. You questioning me again?" Skull's hand shot out, grabbing Viper's collar. "I'm trying to keep us alive," Viper shot back. "I fought amateur MMA, remember? The way Chen moves, the way he set us up. He's not just some community center teacher, he's the Mountain Chen, 3-time heavyweight champion, undefeated. Don't care if he's the devil himself, Skull snarled. Tonight he's a dead man. The bikers roared off into the darkness, splitting into their assigned groups, but Viper held back, watching through binoculars. Something about the community center's layout had changed. The lights created strange shadows, and the equipment wasn't where it had been that morning. To his trained eye, the center had been transformed into a tactical environment. Each path of approach was subtly channeled, each line of sight carefully controlled. It was the kind of setup he'd seen in professional fighting gyms, designed to control movement and create advantageous positions. As the Thunder Kings approached their target, none of them realized they were riding into a carefully orchestrated scenario. Michael Chen hadn't survived 15 years as an undefeated champion by leaving things to chance. Every move, every position, every angle had been calculated with the same precision he'd once used to dominate the octagon. The stage was set for a confrontation that would prove that technique and precision could overcome brute force and numbers. But more importantly, it would demonstrate that the greatest victories don't always come from defeating an enemy. Sometimes they come from transforming them. At the church, Emily couldn't sit still. "We should be helping him," she insisted, clutching her phone, ready to document history. Sarah put a steady hand on her granddaughter's shoulder. "Watch and learn, child. Sometimes the quietest men are the most dangerous. Michael isn't just defending our community center, he's setting a stage." Officer Martinez frowned at her radio. "Captain, we're getting reports of explosions at the Thunder Kings bar." "That's impossible. All their guys are headed to the community center." "Not all of them," Emily grinned, pulling up a series of scheduled social media posts. "I might have mentioned to certain journalists where they keep their illegal weapons stash." Back at the community center, Michael stood in his darkened office, listening to the approaching motorcycles. His hands moved automatically through familiar stretches, muscle memory from thousands of hours of training. The same disciplined patience that had kept him focused during 5-round championship battles had never left him. The first wave of bikers hit the parking lot, their motorcycles' headlights creating a chaotic dance of shadows through the strategically positioned training equipment. Michael had adjusted all the mirrors in the training room, creating disorienting reflections that destroyed their night vision while leaving pools of darkness where he could move unseen. Years of professional fighting had taught him that controlling the environment was often more effective than direct confrontation. As the gang members spread through the community center, their boots echoing on the hardwood floors, they found themselves in a transformed space. The familiar gym had become a labyrinth of shadows and angles. "Spread out!" Skull's voice carried over the confusion. "Find him!" But Michael was already moving, a shadow among shadows. One by one, bikers found themselves isolated and neutralized by an opponent they couldn't see. His movements were precise and economical. No wasted energy, no unnecessary force. Just like his championship fights, it was all about timing and control. Viper, watching from the doorway, saw the pattern emerging. "Son of a," he muttered. "He's using fight psychology, creating confusion, forcing us to expose our positions. This isn't just some ex-fighter. This is why he was undefeated." Skull, enraged by the systematic dismantling of his force, grabbed a gasoline can. "Burn it! Burn it all!" But when he tried to splash fuel on the boxing equipment, he found the can filled with water. All their fuel reserves had been mysteriously contaminated. "Looking for this." Michael's voice came from the darkness. He held up several gas caps. "Never leave your weapons unsecured. Basic fighting principle." Skull spun around, swinging his brass knuckles blindly. The punch went wide, and suddenly Michael was there, executing the same clinch control that had won him his 3rd title. The gang leader found himself face down on the training mats, his arm locked in a submission hold that spoke of years of grappling expertise. "You know what your biggest mistake was?" Michael asked quietly. "Not the protection racket, not threatening the center. It was threatening these kids' future. Some of those teenagers you've been terrorizing, they're starting to believe in themselves, starting to see a way out. The fight was over in less than 20 minutes. When Officer Martinez arrived, she found 30 bikers zip-tied and sitting quietly in the main training area. Some nursing injuries, but none seriously hurt. Another 10 had fled into the night, but it was what happened next that would truly change Riverpoint City forever. Inside the brightly lit gym, the captured Thunder Kings sat in an odd silence. The fight drained from them. The smell of leather training equipment and disinfectant mingled with spilled beer and sweat. Michael moved among them, not as a captor, but as something else entirely, checking their injuries, offering water, and, most surprisingly, asking questions. "You've trained before," Michael said to one of the younger members, noticing his hand wraps. "Golden gloves, right?" the biker muttered, then looked up sharply. "How did you—" "The way you held your guard during the fight. Boxing has a distinctive style." Michael handed him some ice for his shoulder. Similar conversations sparked around the gym as Michael identified more trained fighters among the captured bikers, 12 in total, including Viper, who watched the exchanges with growing understanding. The night that was meant to destroy the community center was about to become something entirely different. A beginning rather than an end. A chance for lost fighters to find their way home through the same discipline that had saved them before. "You're not just some retired fighter," Viper finally said, the pieces falling into place. "The way you set this up, the psychological warfare, the controlled environment, that's champion-level strategy." The gym fell silent. Skull, still secured but now sitting on a weight bench, jerked his head up. "Three-time heavyweight champion," Michael confirmed quietly. "Undefeated. Retired after 15 professional fights." Several of the trained fighters straightened instinctively, their fighting background returning automatically as they recognized the legendary status. Sarah chose that moment to enter the community center, ignoring Michael's exasperated look. She carried a large box of protein bars and sports drinks, standard post-training nutrition from her years of supporting the youth program. "Well, if you gentlemen are done trying to destroy my children's sanctuary, I brought some post-workout supplements." The absurdity of the moment, a grandmother offering refreshments to captured gang members, broke the remaining tension. A few bikers actually laughed, the sound carrying a note of relief rather than mockery. "Sarah," Michael started, but she cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Hush now," she said firmly. "Maria always said you'd forget proper nutrition if someone didn't remind you." She began distributing the bars and drinks with the efficiency of someone who had organized countless youth tournaments. "Besides," she added, "my granddaughter Emily tells me some of you boys used to compete. No fighter goes hungry on my watch." The mention of Emily made several bikers shift uncomfortably, remembering chasing the girl earlier, but Sarah acted as if she were handling just another evening at the youth center. "Mrs. Rodriguez," one of the former boxers spoke up, his voice carrying genuine remorse. "We're sorry about earlier with Emily." "Taking these supplements is a good start toward making amends," Sarah replied firmly, handing him a protein shake. "Now, who here needs ice for their injuries?" Officer Martinez arrived to find an almost surreal scene. Captured bikers drinking post-workout shakes while Michael and Viper discussed proper technique for teaching beginners. The officer's hand remained near her weapon, but the atmosphere in the gym had shifted fundamentally. "Carmen," Michael called her over, "I think we might have a solution that doesn't involve filling up your jail cells." "I'm listening." The officer's expression remained cautious but open. Michael gestured to the trained fighters among the group. "These men aren't criminals at heart. They're fighters who lost their way, found the wrong kind of brotherhood." His words carried the understanding of someone who had walked a similar path. Viper nodded slowly, looking around at his fellow fighters. The Thunder Kings. It was supposed to be about having each other's backs. Somewhere along the way, under Skull's leadership, it became about intimidation and fear. "That true?" Officer Martinez asked the group. One by one, the former fighters nodded. Even some of the non-fighters looked thoughtful, protein bars in their hands. "Here's my proposal," Michael continued, his voice carrying the same measured precision he'd once used in pre-fight interviews. "Those who want to change, who want to find a better path, I'm offering you a chance. The community center needs help. More importantly, I know other fighters who need guidance, kids who understand what you've been through. Skull sneered from his position, still secured with zip ties. You're crazy if you think, shut up, Skull. Viper cut him off sharply. For once in your life, just shut up. He turned to Michael. What exactly are you offering? A program, part training, part rehabilitation. The Sports Commission's been asking me to start one anyway. You help rebuild what you tried to destroy tonight. Learn to teach proper technique, get some counseling, and maybe find a better way to use your fighting skills. Officer Martinez, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Captain, we could make it part of a rehabilitation program. Alternative sentencing. Those who complete it get clean records. And those who don't? Captain Reynolds had arrived, surveying the scene. I'm in, said the young Golden Gloves fighter immediately. Others began nodding, the possibility of redemption awakening something long dormant in their eyes. You're all weak. Skull tried to stand but couldn't with his hands secured. No, Viper disagreed, his voice firm. We were supposed to be brothers, and we forgot what that means. He faced Michael. If you're serious about this offer, I know some other fighters who could use it too. Guys who haven't fallen in with us yet, but they're close. Dr. Park arrived to check on the injured bikers, his medical bag in hand. He paused beside Michael, speaking softly. Maria would be proud of this. It's exactly what she would have wanted. The mention of his late wife made Michael pause. Maria had always believed in second chances. It's why she'd supported his dream of turning the community center into a place of healing after retiring from professional fighting. As the night wore on, plans began taking shape. Captain Reynolds made calls to the district attorney's office, Dr. Park offered to coordinate with sports rehabilitation specialists, and Sarah simply kept distributing protein bars and sports drinks as if this was the most natural thing in the world. By dawn, 30 members of the Thunder Kings, including all 12 former fighters, had accepted Michael's offer. Skull and his most hardened followers would face charges, but the majority of the gang was taking a different path. As the morning sun streamed through the gym's windows, illuminating the boxing ring where countless troubled kids had found their path, Nathan stood watching the transformation begin. He was reminded of countless other dawns he'd witnessed before championship fights, though this time he was watching something grow rather than preparing for combat. We need a new name, Viper said, watching the sunrise from the community center's steps. Can't keep Thunder Kings if we're going to change. His fingers traced the outline of where his gang patches had been, now torn from his leather vest. The action seemed to carry the weight of years of decisions that had led him to this moment. How about the Phoenix Fighters? Emily suggested, having returned to the center despite her grandmother's protests. The former bikers groaned, but there were genuine smiles behind their objections. Something had shifted during that long night in the gym, nourished by Sarah's care and Michael's quiet understanding. Community Combat Sports Alliance, Viper countered, his competitive background showing. CCSA, professional enough for the Sports Commission paperwork, but still maintains our brotherhood. We need something that bridges who we were with who we're trying to become. Dr. Park arrived early with a stack of medical forms and rehabilitation documentation. His car was loaded with additional supplies, everything from basic first aid equipment to physical therapy assessment forms. I've contacted several sports psychology specialists who work specifically with at-risk athletes, he reported, spreading the papers across the center's front desk. They're willing to provide regular sessions here at the center. The familiar environment might help ease the transition. Captain Reynolds followed shortly after, accompanied by the district attorney and 2 social workers. The presence of law enforcement might have once triggered hostility, but now there was only attentive focus from the gathered fighters. DA's on board with the alternative sentencing program, he announced, laying out the legal framework. Any member who completes rehabilitation and maintains clean behavior for 18 months gets their record expunged. But he added firmly, 1 strike and you're out. This is a one-time opportunity for a fresh start. The transformation began immediately, with the precision that spoke to the men's athletic training. The former Thunder Kings, now preliminary members of the Community Combat Sports Alliance, organized themselves into working groups based on their fighting backgrounds and skills. Michael watched as Viper coordinated the efforts, seeing the natural leadership that had been misdirected in the gang now being put to constructive use. "Your organizational skills are impressive," Michael observed as Viper managed the complex logistics of assigning tasks and establishing training rotations. "Fight promotion was my specialty before the gang," Viper replied, checking off items on his improvised duty roster. "Never thought I'd use those skills to rebuild a community center, though." He paused, watching two former rivals working together to repair damaged equipment. "They need this as much as I did. Structure, purpose, understanding." David Kim's arrival created a momentary tension in the air. He walked in steadily, his bruised face a reminder of recent violence. Everyone remembered they were indirectly responsible for his son's injuries. But David walked straight up to Tank, one of the larger fighters, with purpose in his eyes. "Heard you used to teach kickboxing before the gang," he said without preamble, pulling out a business card. "My son's martial arts school needs qualified instructors, not just teachers, people who understand what these kids are going through, who've been there themselves. Interested?" Tank stared at him in disbelief, his massive frame seeming to shrink under the weight of guilt. "After what the Thunder Kings did." "Way I see it," David replied, handing him the card. "Best way to make amends is to help build something new. Besides," he added with a hint of a smile, "you boys owe this community about $50,000 in damages. Might as well work it off doing something that matters." The morning continued to bring surprises as more community members arrived, each offering their own form of support to the rehabilitation effort. Maria Torres from the local restaurant arrived with her food truck, setting up a permanent breakfast station in the parking lot. "Athletes need proper nutrition," she declared, serving protein-rich breakfast burritos and smoothies. "My brother was a boxer. He always said you can't train right on an empty stomach." The transformation of the community center continued with remarkable efficiency. Within days, the property had evolved into a sophisticated rehabilitation facility that maintained its athletic character while incorporating essential therapeutic elements. Michael observed the changes with the same careful attention to detail he'd once applied to his fight preparation. Frank Torres arrived from his bodega with an unexpected proposal, spreading architectural drawings across the newly established conference table in the converted office. "I've been thinking," he began, addressing Michael and Viper. "My storage warehouse has more space than we need. With some renovation, it could house a proper training facility, better than cramming everything into the community center." Viper studied the plans with his fight promotion experience. "We could modify the layout, create dedicated training areas. Many of these guys need professional-grade facilities as much as they need guidance. Their skills are still there. They just need the right direction." Dr. Park, who had established a permanent medical office in the renovated supply room, supported the proposal. "Having a dedicated training facility would significantly enhance our rehabilitation efforts. Many of these men need structure above all else. A professional environment helps with everything from self-esteem to disciplined behavior." The community support continued to manifest in unexpected ways. The local community college offered specialized certification programs in physical education and sports management. The Chamber of Commerce established a youth athletics initiative. Even the Regional Sports Authority expressed interest in supporting amateur competitions. "It's remarkable," Sarah observed, organizing her now famous nutrition station with competition-level precision. "A week ago, these men were viewed as threats. Now they're becoming integral to our community's future." Michael watched as Tank, the former enforcer, conducted basic training sessions for beginners. The skills he'd once used for intimidation were now serving a different purpose. "Form is still sloppy," Tank told one of his students. "We need to adjust your stance, maybe more time on the fundamentals." The therapeutic value of structured training became increasingly apparent. Dr. Park documented how the combination of physical discipline, mentorship, and positive reinforcement helped reduce aggressive behavior. The Sports Commission sent representatives to study the program's effectiveness. The structure here mirrors aspects of competitive athletics that many of these men miss, Michael explained to the officials. Clear objectives, teamwork, responsibility for others' development, but instead of fighting opponents, they're battling their own demons. Officer Martinez's regular reports to the precinct reflected the program's impact. Crime rates had dropped significantly across 3 districts. Other troubled youth were reaching out, inquiring about training opportunities. The success stories were beginning to accumulate. However, challenges remained. Some members struggled with the transition, their aggressive instincts manifesting in unexpected ways. During a sparring session, Snake had a severe anger episode that triggered a violent response. The incident could have derailed the program, but instead demonstrated its strength. "Remember your training," Michael had said, his voice cutting through Snake's rage. "Focus on technique, not emotion. Identify your triggers, control your responses." The other members formed a supportive circle, each understanding the demons their brother faced. David Kim's martial arts school reconstruction became a symbol of the transformation. Under Tank's supervision, the new facility incorporated advanced training areas and a youth development space. The project employed 10 reformed members, each earning certification in athletic instruction. "This isn't just about rebuilding a dojo," David explained to local reporters. "It's about rebuilding lives, rebuilding trust. These men aren't just working for me, they're working for themselves, proving they can create rather than destroy." The Community Combat Sports Alliance established strict protocols for new members. Each applicant underwent thorough screening, including background checks and psychological evaluations. The program's reputation had to be protected through careful vetting and maintained standards. "We're not running a fight club," Viper emphasized during a leadership meeting. "This is about genuine transformation. We owe it to these men and to this community to maintain absolute integrity in our rehabilitation process." Michael contributed his own expertise, developing a comprehensive training program that incorporated professional discipline with community service. Former gang members learned to teach rather than intimidate, their combat skills redirected toward youth development. The training facilities flourished under the reformed fighters' care, the equipment maintained with professional attention to detail. Each class required focus, patience, and consistent effort, qualities these men had in abundance once properly directed. Word of the Community Combat Sports Alliance's success spread beyond Riverpoint City, attracting attention from unexpected quarters. 3 months into the program, Michael received a call from the State Athletic Commission. They wanted to study the program as a potential model for youth intervention across the state. The implications of such expansion required careful consideration. Michael gathered the program's leadership team in the converted office, now a professional meeting space that retained its athletic character. Viper, who had emerged as the program's chief operations officer, presented their current statistics with professional precision. "We've successfully rehabilitated 42 members in the past quarter," he reported, displaying carefully compiled data. "Employment rate among graduates stands at 89%. 0 incidents of violence. The methodology is proving effective, but scaling presents significant challenges." Dr. Park contributed his medical perspective, supported by 3 months of detailed documentation. The program's success relies heavily on personal interaction and customized intervention strategies. The question isn't whether it can be replicated, but how to maintain its integrity during expansion. The transformation of the former Thunder Kings had exceeded expectations. David Kim's martial arts school, now nearing completion, stood as a testament to their capabilities. The new facility incorporated innovative training elements suggested by the reformed members themselves, drawing on their combined combat sports experience. "We're receiving inquiries from 3 neighboring cities," Officer Martinez added, reviewing her notes. "Their law enforcement agencies want to implement similar rehabilitation programs, but there's something else we need to discuss." She paused, her expression growing serious. "We're getting intelligence about potential resistance from other gangs. They see our success as a threat to their operations." Michael absorbed this information with the measured consideration of a seasoned champion. We knew this might happen. Success attracts attention, both positive and negative. We need to approach expansion with the same precision we apply to our current operations. The Community Combat Sports Alliance had developed robust protocols for every aspect of their program. The community center remained its heart, but operations had expanded to include additional training facilities, a comprehensive education program, and professional development opportunities. Each component served both practical and therapeutic purposes. Sarah, who had become the program's unofficial morale officer, brought fresh perspective to the discussion. These men succeeded because we offered them more than rehabilitation. We offered them purpose. Any expansion needs to maintain that essential element. The challenge of scaling while preserving the program's core values prompted intense discussion. Tank, now a certified instructor, proposed a solution based on competitive sports structure. We established satellite facilities, each led by graduates of the original program. Maintain centralized standards but allow for local adaptation, similar to how professional fighting gyms operate independently while adhering to commission rules. Dr. Park supported this approach with medical considerations. Each location would need its own therapeutic team, but we could develop standardized treatment protocols based on our experience here. The training provides both discipline and therapy. We'd need equivalent programs tailored to each location's resources. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent message from Officer Martinez's precinct. A rival gang, the Steel Serpents, had been observed conducting surveillance of their facilities. Their intentions remained unclear, but their presence signaled growing interest from criminal organizations. "They're assessing us," Viper noted, his promotional experience evident in his analysis. "Trying to determine if we're a threat or an opportunity. We need to demonstrate that we're neither. We're an alternative." Michael recognized the delicate balance required. Their success in rehabilitation couldn't come at the cost of security, but neither could they allow threats to derail their progress. "We continue with our expansion plans," he decided, "but we implement enhanced security protocols. Our graduates know how to defend without escalating. We'll put that training to use." The next phase of development proceeded with careful coordination. The Community Combat Sports Alliance established a formal training program for facility leaders, combining athletic discipline with therapeutic principles. Dr. Park developed a comprehensive mental health curriculum that could be replicated across multiple locations. Frank Torres's converted warehouse, now a fully operational training facility, provided a model for future expansions. The facility maintained high standards while creating a supportive community environment. Its success demonstrated that the program's principles could work on a larger scale. "We're not just building a rehabilitation program," Michael observed during a quiet moment in the training area. "We're creating a new way for troubled fighters to reclaim their sense of purpose." The community center was just the beginning. The coming weeks would test their resolve as they balanced expansion with security, growth with integrity. But the foundation they built proved sturdy, a combination of athletic discipline, therapeutic wisdom, and community support that transformed lives while maintaining dignity. Emily's documentary about the program's development had gone viral, attracting national attention. Her footage of former gang members teaching children's classes, mentoring troubled teens, and rebuilding community facilities painted a powerful picture of transformation through discipline and purpose. The program's success began attracting legitimate sponsors and support from professional sports organizations. Former champions offered to conduct seminars, sporting goods companies donated equipment, and local businesses provided employment opportunities for graduates. But with success came increasing responsibility. Each new facility would need the same careful balance of discipline and compassion that had made the original program work. They weren't just teaching fighting techniques. They were rebuilding lives, one training session at a time. 5 years after the standoff at the community center, Michael stood in the original training area watching the sunrise with his morning protein shake. The facility had grown into a sprawling campus of hope, but this particular gym remained special. It was where everything had changed, where a potential tragedy had transformed into a breakthrough. "Thought I'd find you here," Sarah's familiar voice carried across the morning stillness. She wasn't carrying her usual box of supplements, but rather a stack of official-looking documents. The Governor's Medal of Merit ceremony is next month, but that's not what you'll want to see first. She handed him 2 letters, the first bearing the state seal. He set it aside. It was the second letter that brought a smile to his face. A report from their newest rehabilitation center in Eastbrook, their first graduating class, 30 former gang members, all transformed into certified trainers. They're starting youth programs too, Sarah added with satisfaction. Using your training methods, said it helps ground them, reminds them where they started. The training methodology, carefully preserved and developed after that first violent night, had become a symbol of transformation. Every new rehabilitation center started with these core principles, a living reminder that growth comes from discipline, not force. The morning calm was broken by the familiar rumble of motorcycles, but these riders wore different colors now. The Community Combat Sports Alliance emblem, a phoenix rising from a fighting ring, had become known nationwide. Tank led the convoy, returning from a youth outreach mission in the troubled West Side district. "You should have seen it," Tank reported, his face tired but proud. Former steel serpents working alongside ex-road reapers teaching kids proper technique. Local authorities couldn't believe it. The Alliance had evolved into the country's largest combat sports youth intervention program, their reputation for turning former enemies into mentors, making them uniquely qualified for community transformation. At the main training center, Viper, now the program's head of recruitment, was teaching a class on conflict resolution. "Strength isn't about who can hurt who," he told his students, gesturing to the photos lining the walls. "It's about who can help others grow stronger." Dr. Park's medical program had expanded beyond basic sports medicine. "We don't just treat physical injuries anymore," he explained to a new group of rehabilitation specialists enrolled in their certification program. "We heal the invisible wounds too. Sometimes the heaviest damage is in the mind." Emily, now studying sports journalism in college, brought the latest statistics. Over 4,000 graduates nationwide, 50 rehabilitation centers, a 94% success rate. But the real success stories were in the details, like Jamie, who'd grown from a troubled street fighter to running the Alliance's youth competition program. Dr. Park, recently appointed to head the State Athletic Commission's rehabilitation initiative, shared some surprising data. "Remember how we used to track gang territories? Now we track transformation zones, areas where our graduates are actively rebuilding communities. The map looks completely different. The old Thunder Kings bar had been converted into the Alliance's National Training Academy. Walls that once displayed gang colors now showcased success stories. Thousands of before and after photos showing the power of disciplined transformation." Officer Martinez, approaching retirement, reflected on the changes. "5 years ago, we were counting crimes. Now we're counting championships. How many kids went to college on athletic scholarships? How many former gang members became certified trainers? How many communities restored through sports programs?" As evening approached, the center hosted its annual community demonstration. Training mats stretched across the parking lot where battles once threatened, former enemies now teaching side by side, sharing techniques and life lessons. David Kim's martial arts school had become a network, employing over 40 program graduates as instructors. "You know what the most powerful therapy turned out to be?" Dr. Park asked, watching the gathering. "This community, belonging, purpose. We thought we were just stopping violence. Turns out we were rebuilding souls." Sarah naturally had outdone herself with the celebration's nutrition spread. "Can't build proper champions without proper fuel," she insisted, though her protein shakes were now more ceremonial than necessity. Michael stood to address the gathering, something he rarely did. 5 years ago in this gym, we had a choice. Meet force with force, or try something different. We chose to believe in the power of transformation." He gestured to the transformed campus around them. "But what we really built wasn't facilities or programs. We built proof that it's never too late to change, that the hardest hearts can soften when given the right guidance and purpose." As night fell over the community center, Michael walked the grounds one last time. Every step held memories. The spot where he'd first confronted the Thunder Kings, the gym where enemies became allies, the training areas where lost souls found their way home. The Community Combat Sports Alliance had become more than an organization. They were living proof that transformation was possible, that enemies could become family, that fighters could find new battles worth fighting. And it all started because one retired champion believed in second chances, a grandmother wielded protein shakes with love, and a community chose to build bridges instead of walls. In the end, the story of Riverpoint City's community center wasn't just about stopping violence or rehabilitating gang members. It was about remembering our shared humanity. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.